Are you a solopreneur, a team of 5 ready to scale, or a remote team in SLC looking for a new space? Look no further. The Square has everything you need. Fast Wi-Fi, meeting rooms, great coffee, daily breakfast and snack, and a vibrant community to keep you inspired. From dedicated desks to private offices and enterprise suites, there's a space for you. No matter where you are in the journey, the Square has a spot to help you succeed. Check out the Square's co-working and flexible office space today and take your work to the next level. Let's be honest, we're all juggling a lot these days. Between work, family, and everything else, the last thing you need is to spend hours dealing with car-related tasks. That's where Fleetly comes in. Fleetly is your personal car concierge service designed to give you your time back. Need an oil change, car service, ride to the airport, Fleetly takes care of it. Want your vehicle detailed or even sold? Fleetly's got you covered. No more waiting in lines, no more wasted weekends at the shop, just more time to do what really matters, whether it's growing your career, enjoying moments with your family, or just kicking back and relaxing. Right now, Small Lake City listeners can get 10% off with code SLCPOD at checkout. Visit Fleetly.com and let them handle the hassle so you don't have to. Again, use SLCPOD at checkout for 10% off.
I think that's one of the coolest things about Utah is how many connections that you find. I was not raised in a really cultural family at all. But I took a semester to go to on study abroad, and I went to Madrid, and that is where I fell in love with art. So I said, I'll create a market and you make the creations. And people line up. They line up 2 hours in advance to get to that one piece of original art they have seen. The reason that I named my store 4 Lemons is a still life. And I received that piece of art 30, 40 years ago. Kind of was more focused on my tagline, which is art within reach.
Yes. What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Small Lake City Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Nielsen, and this is going to be the last episode of the year. One of the goals I had this year was to put out an episode every single week, and thankfully, with last week's 2-part episode, it actually puts us one over. This will be episode number 53 for 2024. So thank you for everybody who's been listening along. It's been a great year. I've had some amazing conversations with so many people, made so many new friends, and it's so fun to see where the podcast has gone over the past year, but also just my own life in embracing this Small Lake City journey that I'm on. But this week's guest is someone I'm really excited for. So her name is Nanette Amis. She has been running the Utah art market for the better part of 30 years, putting together local artists and local buyers in a way that helps people purchase fine quality original art. However, after running the Utah art market for 30 years, she has recently taken into her own hands of starting her own gallery. The gallery's name is 4 Lemons. It is located in Holladay across the street from the old Cottonwood Mall. And one of my favorite things about it is the tagline is art within reach. So it's not a place where you're going to see 5 or 6 figure price tags, but a lot of things, 1,000 and under, great pieces, great local artists, things that will make your space shine. I'm excited for it. I love the art community in Utah, and anything that helps support local artists and put great works of art in people's homes and spaces, I'm all for it. So let's hear from her and her story of how she became such an amazing art curator and became a creative person. And I like this episode because it starts off with a fun Small Lake City moment between us that I think y'all are going to enjoy. So check it out. Also, it's remarkable how much your granddaughter looks like you.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny.
Yeah, well, even when I was looking at you, I was like, oh, you look like my friend's daughter. I was like, oh, it's because that is your granddaughter.
Well, I'm always so happy to hear that because when I look at her, I see Benton's side of the family.
Interesting.
I see these big, bulgy eyes, that are totally sturt eyes, but
Benton.
She's a cutie.
Yeah, and it's always interesting to see kind of how Small Lake City always comes around. Like, Small Lake City is its own saying within Salt Lake. Everybody's familiar with it. But then when you start a podcast and start to lean into that, It's wild how much it starts to come back into my life. Yeah. And like you alone, for example. So worked with Benton, your son-in-law, in Seattle. That's how I met him. We both went to the U. Got introduced to him in like finance club in college. But
so you knew him at the U?
Yes.
Before.
Yeah, so I knew him at very little, but then as I was going to graduate, I was in finance, wanted to get investment banking, reached out to him because my partner at the time was accepted a full-time job in Seattle at Nordstrom. And so I was trying to get there, wanted to do banking, reach out to him. He's like, hey, listen, we're a small shop. Like, we don't have space. I'm like, totally get it, understood. Go there. I also get a job at Nordstrom. And it was ironic because there was someone who my now ex was working with who they put together. They're both from Utah. Like, oh, like, let's get together. We moved here. We know it's like to move out of state and not know anybody. Mm-hmm. And so then I meet her husband. He's like, oh, you like to golf? I like to golf. Let's go golf next weekend. And so enough we go golfing. I'm like, Benton. He's like, Eric. And then yada, yada, yada. We end up going to lunch like a couple weeks later. He's like, yeah, we actually do need someone now. Are you interested? I'm like, yeah, let's do this. So we worked for a while. I come to realize that was not what I wanted to do with my life. And my undiagnosed ADHD at the time made it even worse. But then, all of us ended up moving back to Salt Lake, and it was not this year, but last year, I get a text from Benton on July 2nd. It might have even been July 3rd. And he's like, hey, what are you doing on July 4th? And I was like, nothing really. I'm going to go to a barbecue later. He's like, well, do you want to come play Soldier Hollow with my in-laws? And I was like, yeah, sure. So, that's when, I think it's your youngest son, the one who played golf at Westminster.
Oh, so you played with Davis?
Yeah, Davis and your husband. And so,
oh, wow.
Little by little,
that's funny.
Meeting everyone.
Oh my goodness.
And
I think that's one of the coolest things about Utah is how many connections that you find. You know, it's just so well connected. And I love connections, and I love like finding a way. That whole like 6 degrees of separation, I think, is like the coolest thing.
Totally.
It's pretty fun.
Especially when you're someone in a role that you are an intermediary between a lot of other transactions, whether it's, bringing artists to the Utah art market and showing and displaying their work, or bringing people to there. There's a lot of joy in being that intermediary because you see people find what they want. They find people on the other side, people see people's joy in what they provide. Exactly. And just all the people you get to interact with. And also, when I was looking at the Four Lemons website, just poking around in my typical curious self, I saw Libby Dibb's name on there, who's actually my stepsister.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Again, one more connection.
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy.
And that's been fun with me and her, because I've started painting in the last 2 years, and that's been like a whole thing in my life that I didn't even know I needed until I started.
Until you did.
I'm the biggest proponent of everyone needs some sort of creative outlet in your life.
For sure.
But then it's funny because we never really had too much connection. She's like a very active LDS mother of, I think they're having their 6th soon.
Oh, wow.
And lives up in Centerville, like very different life. Yeah. And so it was kind of a family like, oh, hey, good to see you. Like small talk, go away. But I'm like, hey, this is what I'm painting. Where are you working? And it's been
fun. It's fun to find different ways to connect to people, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And I've said it multiple times before, but there's different rabbit holes I go down with Salt Lake. And not all rabbit holes are created equal, but my favorite one, partially because I didn't have a lot of context to it before. And now, with painting more, it's become more of a curiosity, is the art scene in Utah. Yeah. Because, we have so many amazing artists that people wouldn't even realize the caliber of artists that they are live here. So many people are moving here. Every competition, every gallery, people always comment about how amazing Utah artists here punch above their weight, especially like on a national and international perspective. Yeah. And so it's fun to talk to the artist, but it's also fun to zoom out and talk to the people who know the artist, provide a network, a platform for artists to shine and see all their work. So Nanette Amis, been running the Utah art market for 30 plus years now. Yeah. Recently opened up your own full-time gallery, Four Lemons in Holladay, Mill Creek. What did you call it? Holladay, Mill Creek, both?
It's Holladay.
Okay. I never know where to draw the line.
I'm not sure where the boundaries are, but yeah, it's definitely Holladay.
But in an iconic, I call it an iconic Utah location because it's where the, what do we call that mall?
Cottonwood.
Yeah, it was Cottonwood Mall. Yeah. And then where, Training Table used to be right there.
Right.
It's a great, great location. And going in, it's fun to see, the artists I know, artists I don't know, and always find something nice. Like I can walk around an art store, art gallery forever. And so the more that we have of those that.
Let's take a quick break.
Hope you're enjoying the episode so far. One big announcement is that merchandise is live. Go head over to the website, smalllakepod.com, to check out the merchandise. We have great shirts, hats, and sweatshirts. I went through a rigorous process to make sure I had the right person creating my merch and the right t-shirts and sweatshirts to do it. So go check it out. Go cop some gear and look great this season in your new Small Lake City merch.
I think this one in particular, you can walk around for a long time. I mean, not only is the space big, but it's just, there's so much to see. Like, and you just, every little corner, you're like, oh, another artist. You're a crafter, and everything's different, it's all different styles, different mediums. So that is one piece of feedback I've been hearing a lot. Like, I could spend hours in here.
Totally.
And I'm like, and I believe it because I'm going to work every day and I'm not getting sick of it.
Good. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
Because it's funny when you walk into galleries sometimes. Like, sometimes you walk in and you could be like, this could be the exact same artist, photographer, whatever it might be, because it all looks so similar. But I love walking into a gallery where everything is so different. Everything, catches your eye in a different way and so many unique perspectives. And I think, obviously you have a lot of experience in seeing people's opinions, your own opinion, and bringing it all together. But it's fun to see it in such a space that it flows well. There's so much diversity in art and creativity. I think you've done a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's been fun. It's a work in progress, but it's fun. And it's just, I think it's 30 years of work kind of just pays off in the end. It's like, you can't build a relationship overnight. And, after 30 years, you've built these relationships of, oh, I think you'd be a good fit. And I think you'd be a good fit. And, there's so many more people that I would love to have in the store. And and I've got a big space and I just am like, I'm bursting right now.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about the potential too for, future relationships and experiences down the road. So
seriously, there's only more artists coming up and making great work, and there's always space for people at the top.
Totally.
But I want to go back to the beginning because I'm curious, how much of, your life, your upbringing, early days was centered around art, or if it's something that you found, later in life. Curious about kind of the foundation that set it all.
Wow. So it is kind of interesting because I was not raised in a really cultural family at all. Like, I had 7 brothers. I didn't have any sisters. And I was just, I was going to football games, baseball games. And I wasn't really interested in art or being creative or any of that growing up. I think my mom wanted me to really be a girl because she'd had, all these boys. So, she enrolled me in dance and gymnastics and
She's
stuff
like,
like
I will
that.
have my girl, whether you like this or not.
But anyway, it really wasn't until I went to college. I went to BYU and I changed my major about 10 times because I had no idea what I wanted to do. But I took a semester to go to on study abroad, and I went to Madrid. And that is where I fell in love with art. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. And we didn't travel a lot when I was younger, and we never went to Europe. And so that was kind of an eye-opening experience to travel around Europe and take in all of these amazing museums. And I fell in love with art at that point. I didn't ever think I could be an artist. I just was an appreciator of art. So I ended up majoring in humanities and emphasizing in art history. And then fast forward, I got married to a guy from Seattle. And so we moved to Seattle for a couple of years when we were first married. And that
Sounds familiar.
That was eye-opening because I'd been born and raised in Utah, and I was now in a foreign place where I didn't know anybody. But one of the things that I absolutely was drawn to and loved was Pike Place Market. And I would go there every weekend.
Amazing.
And I thought, this is the coolest thing. Like, why doesn't every city have Pike Place Market?
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, well, we don't live on the coast, so you're not going to be able to throw fish across the counter in Salt Lake City. But the whole other component of the crafts and the art was also very interesting to me. And I just immediately gravitated towards people that created things with their hands.
Yeah.
And so when we later moved back to Utah, I thought, I want to have something like this. And then we traveled back east I had a brother living back there, and I had a sister-in-law who was making painting frames and selling them at like farmers markets. And I thought, this is so cool. Why don't we have something like this in Utah? Mm-hmm. And of course, now we do have the wonderful farmers market which is fantastic. But, this is back in the early 90s, and there was nothing like that in Utah where you could just, other than the arts festival, but that always felt a little bit out of reach, for me. So at the same time, I had friends that were graduating for college that were really creative. And I said, hey, you need to sell your stuff. We need to create something. So most artists are not really great at selling their own product, right? Yes. And so I said, I'll create a market and you make the creations. So at that time, I had maybe a handful of like 15 or 20 friends and acquaintances. And I said, we're going to have, and I called it Utah Art Market, and it was in my backyard. We set up for 2 days and people just came and sold their wares. And I think at that point in time, I was making like homemade herbal vinegars or something like that. And I had a friend making jewelry and another friend making soap and another friend painting t-shirts. And it was just a hodgepodge of things. But I fell in love with that. I thought, this is so fun. And so that just kind of grew to one show a year. And then I decided to do a Christmas show in my house, and I would empty my entire house. Oh, really? Wow. Out. All the furniture would go in the garage, and people would come set up their stuff and go through all of my house. Today, I can't believe I did that, But I emptied, once a year, I emptied my entire house out. And we had a Christmas show. And after about 5 or 6 years, that became too much. And so I ended up moving to Sugar House Garden Center, where that was my home for another 10 years or so. And then COVID hit, and I kind of graduated from there. And from there, I've just kind of rented different places throughout the city wherever I can find an empty building. Yeah. And as of the last couple of years, that's just been really stressful to find a place to rent that's been big enough. And so I've just in the back of my head thought, I'd like to have my own store. Maybe we can get a space where we can have it all the time. And so that's kind of what landed us right here at Four Lemons is, and it's new. And so I'm not really ready to give up the Utah Art Market yet, because that is kind of my for sure income that I can depend on. And the store is something that's still young and new. So I hope it's someday that I can marriage the two together and it can just be the store. But for now, I'm going to do both. So,
no, I think that's amazing, because I love how much everything you've done, it supports you. Like, obviously you make a business out of it and have made a business out of it, but it's also supporting so many of your friends, the ones who are like, hey, listen, I make some soap, like bring it to my backyard, bring it to my house, and there's space for you. And thinking of, taking apart your entire, because I hate moving. I don't think I've ever met someone who's like, I love moving. I just love packing everything up. So I imagine this like...
And I've said to myself, I would never move, I moved across the hall. I bought the house I grew up in. Nice. So I moved across the hall, and that is it. When we came back from Seattle, I've never moved. I can't imagine moving. So it was kind of weird, But
packing it all up. But it all, 'tis the season, but reminds me of the scene in The Grinch where he comes home and his wife's like tearing through the house trying to find all the lights to compete with Martha May Whovier. Right. And he's like, oh, is this the chandelier? He's like, it's all for the cause. Exactly. I just imagine cool, just moving out the entire house and sure, we'll have this market.
Yeah, I got my house clean once a year, that was for sure.
True. But I also love the part of you going to Seattle, because I think I love Salt Lake. This is kind of like my love story to it. But at the same time, there's a lot of people in Salt Lake that are boomerang people. They are raised here, they go away, they come back. And I love the kind of perspective it gives you, because to go to Seattle, to have this cultural experience, to not understand that there are other ways of living. Right. We can go to this market every day where there's all these nooks and crannies and restaurants and food that you could spend years and you probably wouldn't find or experience all of them. And because when I lived there, I actually lived 3 blocks away from the market. And that was my favorite thing is there's a gym I would go to right next to it. And then I would go walk through, try to find something new, go even just walk around in my own curiosities and the amount of things that you would find. And I would always run along the water by the market. Well, I guess down from the market technically, to Sculpture Garden. And so then I would just walk around there. And I remember when I first walked, I was like, this is so stupid. Like I just, and then after a while I was like, oh, I think this is why they made this. Like, this is why I so like cool. this. And so like little by little, I found myself and my brain kind of changing a little bit, especially on the creative side. And I never realized how many of like these little like seeds were being planted at that time. Right. But it wasn't until I came back, and then, took too long after that to be like, oh, there's this creative part of me, and it's a part that my own personality, like I would never go up to somebody like, I'm a creative person. I'd probably say the opposite, which is what most people do say.
Right. Oh,
and I always challenge people on that. I'm like, oh, when's the last time you actually tried? Middle school art class when like you don't want to look like the guy who's actually trying to draw, like okay. And also creativity doesn't have to be on a canvas or a piece of paper or anything. Go cook something in the kitchen, there's creativity's everywhere. And I love that about creativity, is that I think people don't give it enough justice. They think if they don't paint or they don't craft, they're not creative. But, we had an event in the store a couple nights ago, and a friend of mine created all the food, and I created the venue, and her food was just masterful. And she's always saying, oh, I'm not creative at all. But I'm like, she is. that food was, I don't know anyone that would create this party and want to make every aspect of it. So yes, creativity is so far reaching. Yeah. And everyone has something. You might need to do something new. You might need to change your ego and what it tells you who you are. But I that's usually the first thing I tell to anybody who's kind of feels, I don't want to say like lost, but just like doesn't know where to go, like not so much air in their wings, like just go do something creative. Yeah, give your brain another direction and go and see what happens. Sure. What was I going to say? Anyway, so art market. So you have these 30 years of building these all out. And it's so fun to go, because I remember the first one I went to, it was the last Christmas one. And I think it was like, there were things everyone was selling, I think it was like 50, 100, and 250, and then other things that they wanted to. But it was all in an effort to make it affordable. Right. So after I did art market for 10 or 15 years, I realized that I was loving the whole art thing. It took me a while to build up a reputation where artists would want to do my show, because I started out mostly doing, crafty things. But my love was always towards fine art. And so slowly, I would have fine artists apply to my show. And then I realized, there is a hunger for fine art here. But I was intimidated to walk into a gallery, and I thought, I'm sure other people are too. So can we create a space where people can buy fine art and they're not intimidated? And I felt like, a lot of the art we were selling at Utah Art Market was affordable. So I got together with 4 or 5 artists who I had established a relationship with, and we kind of came up and brainstormed. And one of them said, well, what if we created a show where everything was like 100, 300, 500? So we called it the 135. Mm-hmm. And artists had to bring, art just in those price ranges. It since has kind of, expanded to more than that. But even still, artists have to bring me at least like 12 items in that price range. And so that was just a way for, okay, you can come and you can buy $100 piece. Like, you don't have to feel like you have to spend $1,000 or even $500. You can start small and just buy. But, if you're used to just buying prints all the time, stretch it a little bit and buy $100 piece. Yes. And once you get hooked on buying a piece of original, like, you're hooked, you don't want to buy prints anymore. And prints have their place, and it's so nice to have prints for people that, don't want to spend that much money on original art, or younger people who can't afford it, or even older people who can't afford it. Like, we sell prints, and I love prints, but I will say, like, once you buy your first original piece of art, you're going to be hooked, and you're going to want more. And so that was the whole reason for starting that, was just to have it be approachable and have people feel like I can do this. And now we've been doing that for, 7 or 8 years. And we do it twice a year, and people line up. They line up 2 hours in advance to get to that one piece of original art they have seen advertised, that they want to get. So
it's really caught on. It's been fun.
Yeah, and that was one thing that, I mean, it was part of that breadcrumb path of like the art scene in Utah. And I was like, oh, like I didn't think there was, I was taken back by how many people were there, how much interest there was.
Yeah.
And it's fun to see that it is starting to get better, because a lot of the, I mean, demographics have changed. And I mean, even if thinking back on my conversation with Micah Christensen and him and his perspective of the art world, I mean, he has seen these transformations, and he told this story when he was approached by, I mean, Utah, I mean, near billionaire, of him being like, hey, I'll host an event at my house. You bring the artists, I'll bring the people. And he's like, sounds great. How awesome. Yeah. So puts this whole event together, brings out these artists, flies out some of them, not a single thing sells. And
devastating.
So he's mad. He's like, what the hell? Like, I threw this whole thing. I bring people out.
Who'd you bring?
And just have this guy be like, well, you know, it's like, it's kind of a luxury for like us. Like, we would never spend that. Like, I'd rather go buy another house, like a house in St. George for my family, than a $20,000 piece of art for my house. Yeah. And I think that, I mean, anecdotally, I think that is starting to change as, I mean, people are having less kids. There's a lot less, I mean, the LDS religion is not the majority in Salt Lake County anymore, and people have a little bit more flexible income because they don't have kids, and people are making a little bit more on that end and are growing up and being like, oh, well, how do I want to have my space? Because I'm very particular about my space. I'm a particular person about a lot of things, but my space is one of them. Yeah. And so like the thought of just being like, oh, I'd rather have bare walls, or like, so this thing I got from Target, or this thing I found on the web, and not saying you can't have those, and I always will have like a hodgepodge of everything. Yeah. But the things that I see on my walls that are originals versus prints, night and day difference of how they are in the space, how I feel about them emotionally. Yeah. And so, yeah, I get that bug of like, once you taste it, you're like, oh yeah, I do like having really good things on my walls.
I am an art addict. I'm telling you, like I can't stop. Like my house has art from top to bottom, and we only have 2 or 3 pieces that are expensive. You know, the rest of it are things that we've gotten on good deals, and, you know, we've spent under $1,000 for most of our art, but I can't stop buying because I love it so much. Yeah. And, you know, like I just start stacking it up, and I'm like, this is kind of like an addiction. And I think it's true, though. A lot of people just, you know, maybe don't value it as much, or would rather go, you know, buy a new outfit or whatever. But one of the things I just find so amazing about buying art is that it sticks with you. You have it forever, you know? And it's like, you know, the piece of art, the first piece of original art I ever had, which was the reason, you know, that I named my store 4 Lemons, is a still life. And I received that piece of art like, you know, 30, 40 years ago as a gift. And it's still one of the most, you know, precious pieces of material items that I own in my house, is that original piece of art, you know, and someday one of my kids will have it, and hopefully they'll hand it down to one of their kids. I mean, and you think about all of the art that are in museums everywhere that are thousands of years old. They're still there. They're still existing, you know. And the you know, sadly, those Nikes are not going to be around in 40 years. Well, maybe they will. They'll be collector's items if you keep them.
One or the other, we'll see.
But I think, you know, that is the cool thing about art, is if you decide to give that as a gift or ask for it for a gift, is it something that is going to be, it's sentimental and it's going to be around forever. So it's an investment, and it's a great gift.
Yeah. Do you know Art Swindle?
Art Swindle, no.
I guess it's my sister's ex-husband, but I call him my brother-in-law because same relationship. But his dad his whole basement is just art. Like his house is, I mean, gallery walls, floor to ceiling, but then you go down to his basement, it's all organized and stacked. Like, it's impressive. Like, there's thousands of pieces of art in there. So his name isn't just a good nickname, but it's very appropriate for who he is. And it's fun because he says the same thing. He's like, well, I just see a great piece of art and I want to have it. Like, it makes me feel a certain way, and I'll take it. It makes you happy. And the cool thing about purchasing art, and one of the things that I love about my business, is I get so excited about seeing something that brings me joy. But then it's almost that much more exciting to see
that art being sold, and the artist that created it, like how happy they are that somebody wants what they created. So there's this whole process of you love it, you buy it, and then the artist gets to have this joy of selling it, and then you take it home and, love on it forever, you know? But it's so exciting for me to like sell something for an artist. Like that brings me a lot of joy. And it's, going back to what you were saying about your friend. And I mean, there's nothing more stressful than having an art show and nothing sells. And you're just like, oh, you just feel so bad because you know how hard those artists worked to create those pieces. And you want so badly for somebody else to love it as much as they do, or how much love went into creating it. And I think that's the hardest part of my business, is just predicting what will sell, what won't sell. And when something doesn't sell, just, I mean, my house is full of what my husband calls charity buys, because I was like, I couldn't bear that this person sold nothing at the show, so I'm going to buy something. He's like, no more charity buys, And, but yeah, I love making people happy by selling their art. I do.
And that's been one thing I've done recently, because like I've learned with painting, like, I mean, the best way to get better is just more reps, whatever you can do to just keep painting and keep painting and keep painting. And so, I mean, I'm always usually I'm trying to do bigger pieces, which is fun and stressful at the same time. But then to get more reps, I have these like kind of little, I think like 4x6, maybe like 6x8 canvases. And so if I'm ever bored, I'll be like, all right, cool, let's just whip out. My favorite thing to paint is flowers.
Really?
And so
That's
I'll
awesome.
be like, I have this list of people in my phone that are, I mean, family, friends, loved ones, people who have supported me in times of my life. And so every time I'm like, I don't want to work on this, let's just go do one of these, and I'll hack away at this list. And so like, thankfully, like my mom and my sisters are all taken care of. And so now it's down to like friends, and I brought these
you just
peonies.
give them gifts and things. That's so nice.
I painted these peonies for my friend. I went to deliver it to her. I was like, hey, just like, she's actually the one who's like, hey, like, you need to do the podcast. You should have started yesterday. Let me know how you need, like, and really was the one to be like, just do this. Like, why aren't you doing this already?
That's cool.
And so
you need to show me some of your work. I want to see it.
I'll show you. You can critique me all day. But it was fun just to see, like, I could tell in her eyes and other people I've given these to that it's like, this might be the nicest thing anybody has ever done for me. Yeah, and not saying like, oh, look at what I did, but like...
No, just that someone would give you that. Like, it's really special. It really is.
And especially as you start to paint, you realize how much of like yourself you really do put in a painting. Like every time I go to, I mean, either of my sister's houses, because they have whatever I painted for them, it's usually in their living room or somewhere. Yeah. And then I'll be like, oh, I remember when I was painting through that, life was so hard because I was going through this or this and that and that. And I'm glad I had painting, because that helped me get through that. Yep. And like, they don't know that. I mean, I'm just glad that they enjoy it, but yeah, it's fun to be able to give a little bit of yourself to someone, see someone enjoy it. And I mean, especially to see, I actually went over to that person's house to drop something off, and it was like
front and center.
I was just like,
that's sweet. Yeah, it does. It's a really special gift. I think it's lovely. Anything, in my opinion, handmade is just a really special gift.
Oh yeah. And that's kind of like the part of growing up too. I mean, fast forward 30 years ago, I'd be like, here's my list. These are all the things I want. And then you kind of go through this period of like, oh, like it doesn't really matter how much money you spend as long as it's thoughtful. And then like the things that people are like, oh, I spent my own time and effort on this. Like that's, I mean, that's the nicest thing anybody can do.
Right. I think one of the things I was thinking about, when I was thinking about this was like, the whole idea of the handmade and how, what is it that kind of pushed that? And I think it goes to say, like, you don't know what kind of influence you're having on your children or on someone else, like at this early stage of your life. And I was thinking about just growing up, and I'm telling you how I really wasn't part of, culturally, or art wasn't a big thing growing up. But the thing that was a big thing was, growing up in this Mormon culture of self-reliance where everybody made their own jam and you knitted your own sweaters. And, there was such a carryover from pioneer heritage of creating and making your own things. And that was a life I grew up in, like my mom taught me how to knit, and my mom taught me how to bottle peaches and how to make jam. And she taught me how to, cook Sunday dinner. And all of these things were things that I never really appreciated at the time. And I just thought it was a chore. It's just what everybody did. You learned how to embroider when you went, at church or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, but now I think those were like the seeds that were planted at an early age and why I appreciate something that's handmade. And it's very rare to find that now. Mm-hmm. We delivered Christmas Eve gifts. Every Christmas Eve, my mom would make homemade caramels or homemade bread. And now nobody gives homemade gifts to their neighbors. You know what I mean? And so that to me is still really special. Like somebody brings you a loaf of homemade bread. I really savor that. I appreciate that because, that took a lot of effort, and I know how much effort it took. And so I still think that it's a bit of a lost art, but bread making has now become such a trend. And
thanks, COVID.
Sourdough, you know what I mean? And now everyone's knitting, and it's kind of cool to see this comeback of the handmade. And I think people do appreciate it. Not enough people engage in it, but they do appreciate it. And I think that is unique about Utah is that we do appreciate the handmade because we've been taught that, back to pioneer heritage. And when you live outside of the state, I don't know that it's as much appreciated. People are they buy what they want, Yeah. And so I think that's kind of fun about this state is I feel like there are a lot of people that are self-reliant and know how to do these things. And it's a blessing and a curse at times, right? Because there is that whole attitude of, oh, I can, they come to the store and they take pictures and I can go home and make that. I'm not going to buy it, which is, a little frustrating. But there's also the other side of it where people, we have a lot of quilters in this state. Yeah. And so they appreciate how much effort went into, and they know why that quilt is $1,000 because, there's more than 500 hours in putting it together. They're probably getting paid 10 cents an hour.
Exactly. And I totally agree because it's interesting to see, especially once you get to like, quote, adulthood, you realize how much time we have. Like, if you're giving 40 hours a week to work, you have, 40 more hours a week to kids and family, and all of a sudden you're left with maybe 2-3 hours a day that's actually, at most, that's yours. Right. Probably on the less side, especially if kids in a busy life and a family starting a business. Yeah. And for someone to be like, hey, you know how busy I am. You know my schedule. I made you this with that time that I have. Be like, because money's one thing. Especially if people have a lot of money. Oh, you bought me something? Like, thank you so much. Those 3 clicks meant so much to me. Not saying like I'm ungrateful, but there's definitely a difference in someone literally like getting calluses on their hands from knitting or quilting, or their clothes stained from paint because they were painting you something. Right. I will take that 20 times, even if it's like the smallest little thing, like
a million times over.
Exactly. Even my sister, she's getting into needlepoint, or she has been for a while, I guess. Yeah. But it was interesting. So my sister's boyfriend, he was actually the first person to ever ask her to be like, hey, will you make something for me? And she's like, I would love to. And I guess he forgot about this. She was supposed to give it to him for his birthday in October, then forgot. And every year, me and my sisters and my mom and significant others get together for our own, just kind of Christmas party, because we have step family too, but we always just do something between us. And instead of doing gifts one year, we're like, hey, can we just do favorite things? Like $20 max, just like whatever's made your life better. And like, so I got everybody like a thing of Mentos, like a big thing, because I always have it in my car because I'm always about to go talk to someone. I never want to have bad breath. Yeah. And I gave them these like, they're like these mop socks. So you just put over your foot. Because like I always hate being like, oh, my floors are kind of dirty. Right. I don't want to get out my Swiffer or my mop and have to mop it all. But if I can just like put on a sock and have like a little like all-purpose cleaner, I can just go walk around and scrub and be good. And so that's what, like, just as an example. Yes. And so we do all of that. And my oldest sister Britta comes out. She's like, oh, David, I forgot to give you your birthday present. I couldn't make it to your birthday party. And she pulls out this needlepoint it's like of Utah, and then has Sego lilies, which is his favorite flower. Aww. And she hands it to him. And I wish we recorded it, but it was just this like jaw drop of face of just sheer like amazement and like awe. And I was like, and that's why we do things like this.
Yeah. That's so great. I love stories like that.
Same.
Anything that somebody created, and that's just so sweet.
Exactly. And so I want to go kind of more of the decision to start For Lemons, because I mean, you've been doing the art market for decades at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, what was kind of that, impetus or that moment when you're like, this is what I have to do now?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit earlier that it has become increasingly difficult to find places to hold my shows. And when I do find a place, it's usually an empty retail space that's kind of dingy and ugly and run down, but it's just, okay, that was a good price. I can afford to pay for that. So we'll set up shop here. And, and it usually ends up, working out fine because the art and the craft sell, that becomes the selling point, not the space. But I also just would ruminate and think, wouldn't it be cool if I could, this is a really great piece of art, and this artist is really doing some cool stuff, but they have no idea how to set it up. It just, if I could just do the display and I could just, display it, it would look so much better and it would sell so much better. And I would be like, I wish we could have our own store and I could just, because you set up an art market and, you've got 100 vendors and maybe 80 of them are selling well. And then, the other 20 didn't sell very well. And anyway, I just thought I want to set up my store that is exactly what I want, based on the history of what sold well at Utah Art Market in the past. Based on what I like the best, what I think will sell the best. Yeah. And mostly I just want to be able to have a place I can depend on and not be worried about where am I going to hold my next show. And frankly, there's just not that many places here in Utah where you can just rent out a space for a short period of time. There's all these wedding venues, but they're not big enough for a show, and they're so expensive.
Oh, yeah.
To rent out for a week. And then you have an empty retail space, which a retailer doesn't typically want to rent to you for 5 days. There's not profit in that for them. So it's been a really tough place. And so I had been working with a gentleman from Woodbury who had been helping me find places, and he'd been so good to me and finally showed me this place over in Holladay. And I'm like, wait, this used to be Pier 1. I used to come here all the time.
I've been here before.
I hung out at Cottonwood Mall. This is my stomping ground. This is familiar to me, and this seems fun. And I thought it's a place that's big enough that I could hold a show, but I also could just leave my show up, And I thought, through the years, my customers have been like, I wish you were open all the time. This is so hard. You're only open for 5 days and I'm out of town. And so I got a lot of feedback on that, I wish you were open. So it just sort of challenged me to, it'd be great to have a place that I choose what's in there and I get to display it the way I want to display it. And, so, we just kind of happened on this spot, and it was kind of run down. It didn't look very good. It was black tile and black walls. It was like walking into a cave. And I thought, okay, I don't have a lot of money to, build this out, but I think if we just painted the walls and redid the floors, it would say a lot. And it just transformed the place. It's just there's so many windows, and I just loved the location because it was close to where I lived, so I could get there easily. It's Holladay is a great demographic for people that want to buy art. And frankly, there's a great little pocket of locally owned women-owned stores in Holladay. And there's this, you have Amy Boutique, and you have the Fox Shop, and you have Knot and Spool, and, you have these fun little gift shops that are all right there in the heart of Holladay. And then I thought Cottonwood Mall is going to,
oh yeah,
that's going to hopefully in the next 5-10 years be a really great destination spot when they finished that. So it seemed like a good spot for me. But mostly it was just getting to the point where it was getting increasingly difficult to find a place to hold a show. That was my main impetus. And then just wanting to curate, because I feel like, I don't want to like cut myself down at all, because I know I have a lot of talents, but I'm not an artist. And, maybe I am, and I just haven't really tried it. But I am creative, and I do think that I have a gift for curating. Mm-hmm. And I think through 30 years, I've had this opportunity to see what my clientele really likes. And while, there's a lot of things I like that are not in my store, because I can't just put everything in there that I love. Like I do have a pretty good idea of what my clientele is going to buy. And so that's kind of where I'm at. Like I love abstract art, but it doesn't sell very well to my clientele. It's hard to sell that in Utah. But so I feel like that is one of my gifts, is that I have a good eye for what I think will sell. And so I was excited to just curate this space of, what I wanted to be there. And, it's not to say that, that I have every one of my favorite artists there. I mean, there's so many talented people in Utah.
You would need 4 times the space if you wanted to show everything that you wanted to.
And I think, and people have been coming out of the woodwork, honestly. When they've walked in, they're like, how do I get into the store? Like I think there are so many creative people here in Utah that want an outlet, and so in that regard, I feel like I could open a store twice as big, but you also have to get your customer base to the point where it's big enough to support that, and so while I have over 130, 150 artists right now that are showing in my store. We're at a point now where we've got to start, pushing the advertising, getting people there, people that know about it. Because when anyone comes into the store, they're like, this is amazing. Oh my gosh. And truly, like, I don't think there's anything like it in Utah.
I can't think of anything. Like, because I know, and we talked about it when I came into the shop, like, I mean, there's like Anthony's Fine Art and Antiques. Right. Which is,
that's, an incredible store and their clientele is obviously, a much more well-established, it's more expensive and it's, beautiful, big antiques and things like that. And there's some really beautiful galleries here in Utah. I mean, you have David Erickson and you have the Meyer Gallery and the Wexler Gallery that all carry amazing, beautiful things. And I don't want to take away from anything they're doing, because they're promoting amazing Utah artists here as well. I just kind of was more focused on my tagline, which is art within reach.
Yes.
Because by the time you get to a gallery, your prices are a little bit higher. And so I was trying to create a space where you could buy something that wasn't quite as expensive. And, don't get me wrong, I have a $20,000 painting for sale in my store. So if you want to spend the money, I'm happy. I will help you find that piece. But those kind of people that can afford that are a lot smaller pool, than my clientele who, and originally I was only going to have art in my store. But then I realized, no, I have built this clientele of Utah art market, and not everybody can afford art. And so I want everybody that walks through that door to feel like they can walk away with something. Maybe if they want to, maybe they don't want to, but it's like, they can buy a $6 felted finger puppet, or they can buy a $9 bar of soap, or they can buy a $500 painting, either way. Or they can buy a $100 piece painting, but there's something for everybody there.
Agreed.
And I think that it's a really, I don't know, it's unique, because I think that was a hard thing to do, because you didn't want the artists who were in the store to feel like they were not taken seriously by being in a store with soap or whatever, you know what I mean? But I think it works. I really think it works. Like, I think the art speaks for itself, and I think people appreciate being able to come in and it's like, I'm looking for jewelry, or I'm looking for I'd like to get a $30 mug. But then all of a sudden they're surrounded by all this beautiful art. And every once in a while they're like, wow, that's really cool. I'll take that piece of art too, And
it's a hard place to be like, I'm coming for mug or finger puppet, whatever it might be, and not be like, I'm going to the cash register and we're checking out. It's like, well, let's walk. Like it's so easily inviting. And it's so funny you talk about how you walked in this place for the first time and it was this like black cave. Because if you go in now, I would never think it was ever like that, because there's so much natural light from the windows, the way it's laid out. I mean, it's just a great space in general. I think you did a great job. And it just fosters a good flow to make everybody walk through as they come. Because again, if they come for a mug and they walk around and they buy a mug, still a great success. And who knows, maybe they might come in with a friend later and do that. Yeah. But I also love the point that you made about there's things I like and there's things that people like. And I think that's one thing with people who try to open a gallery or try to invest. I mean, even people who just invest in art in general, they'll think what they like is what everybody likes. True. And then they'll have this gallery or collection. It's like, hey, everything's the exact same. And not everybody likes this as much as you do. But for you to be able to take off your subjectivity and look objectively at, the artists you support and the customers you support and be like, and this is how I'm going to curate this gallery to match what I feel like it is. And I think it's great because, I walk in and, there's church art, there's skiing art, there's so much landscaped art. There's just so many, there's a big diversity with it. So I think you did, to your point of thinking that you're a good curator, I agree. You are a good curator.
Well, and also back to what we were saying about like coming in for a finger puppet. I also think that if you were just coming in for art, I don't think you would have this feeling like, oh, this is just a craft store or whatever, you know what I mean? And I think that as well is what I wanted. And I do feel like people like that, they like the art. And there are going to be people that, have so much money, that they're going to go to, a big gallery in Park City or or they're going to go to Europe and buy their art or whatever. And that's great. That's amazing, but it's probably not my clientele. Like I'm trying to reach out to the people who love art, who don't think they can afford it, but, start small and just, it's art within reach. We have art within reach. And I think, if there's something you want and you can't afford it. Like I had a lady come in last week that just fell in love with this painting and it was $500. And, she's single mom and supporting herself. And I just, I said, well, if you can pay me $100 a month, I'll hang on to this piece for you and you can have it. Like you can't come up with $500 right now. Like I want art to get into the hands of people. I want to do everything I can for you to have a piece of original art in your home because it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So, we're making that happen and I'm excited for her,
No, I agree.
Like I want people to have art in their homes because it brings me so much happiness.
Which is the right attitude to have. Like imagine you're like, you want this and like get out of my because there are
sorry
people
you can't afford it, you know what I mean? Like I don't want to be that person. I don't want anyone to come in thinking, oh, are they looking at me like, because I have been into galleries where I feel like no one's given me the time of day. Like I don't have the look or whatever of someone that's going to buy that painting. And it's like, and I just want to turn around and walk out.
Exactly.
But I'm like, no, you the most unsuspecting people will spend a lot of money and you have no idea.
It's like the adult version of like when you're a kid and you go into a store and you have money, you want to buy something, but they all look at you like, oh, it's a kid. I'm not going to help them. You're like, I actually do want, like, I can do this.
Yeah, exactly.
It's walking into like, oh, you're not going to buy this. You're like, yes, I am. Yeah. Well, I want to go back to the painting that inspired all this, Four Lemons. Where did this paint, like, where did you find this painting? Who gave it to you? What was it that inspired you about it so much?
Yeah. So, way back when I was first married, my siblings and I would do like draw names, and we would have a gift exchange. And so my brother, David, he now lives in Virginia. he was single at the time, and he was really into art, and he was a doctor, and so, or maybe he was in residency or something, but he had more money than I did, and still does, but anyway,
Tracks.
we were newly married, like we could not afford to buy original art. And so he had drawn our name for Christmas. And so he bought us this painting that he had bought at Dolores Chase Gallery, which was a really cool gallery downtown where David Krishiznik got his start. And anyway, it's a windowsill with 4 lemons on it. And it's a painting by Rebecca Wagstaff. And it was the first piece of original art I'd ever owned. And I was kind of just taken back that he gave that to us as a gift. I was like, whoa, wow, this is amazing, And I just felt like so important that I now owned a piece of original art, and I loved it. And actually, the painting was not titled. It was just 4 lemons on a windowsill. It was, signed on the back of the art, but it didn't have a title. But I always really loved it. And so fast forward, I'm thinking about this store, and I'm talking to my marketing team and my graphic design team, and, what are we going to name this? And, and we're trying to come up with some branding thoughts, and it just, things just weren't coming together. And I'm just thinking of kind of names like, creative co-op or collaborative creative, and these things that really weren't very meaningful, or, things that you would really remember. And my branding designer said, well, don't you have like a piece of art that is sentimental to you, or, or a style of art? And it just right then just clicked. And I was like, that Rebecca Wagstaff painting. It's like, and I looked and I thought of that painting in my head, and I said, yes, 4 lemons. There's 4 lemons on that windowsill. I have 4 children now. They're all helping me make this happen. And so, I put it in the group thread of all my kids, because that was like a weekly exercise. Okay, everybody submit their favorite 5 names for the store.
I love it.
And some of the things that came in, were pretty crazy. But anyway, I submitted it, and everybody was like, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Perfect, and I love it too. I mean, a couple people in the family were like, I don't know, it sounds like a cafe or a restaurant. I said, well, all the better, because everybody stops for a cafe or a restaurant.
Exactly.
And they drive by and they see that, and they're like, let's go check out 4 lemons. Well, okay, I can't get a loaf of bread here, but this is even better.
Yeah, we'll get you fed in a
yeah. So that's how 4 lemons started, and so it's even more fun because it's a sentimental name to me.
Yeah.
And I have the painting on display on my cash register so everyone can see it.
And I also love that you have the wall behind the cash register that has all the artist paintings of their own interpretation of 4 lemons and what.
And that's what was so cool, is like now the name like had just so much more to add, because then I said to all the artists participating, hey, here's the name of the store. Anyone that wants to paint a painting with a lemon theme, please, I would love to have it. And I didn't know what I would get. You
challenge a bunch of artists with a specific thing to do. They're like, I can do. Everybody else
is
doing this.
I got it.
I can do this.
And they just started coming in, and it was so fun to see everybody's, interpretation, and and some artists who like have never painted a still life, like, okay, this was a real stretch for me. But so we ended up receiving so many pieces, and I'm like, what are we going to do? How are we going to display them? And I'm like, well, this has to be the focal point of the store. So yeah, it is. And it's so fun right when you walk in to see all those paintings.
Yeah. I love that story, because it's so fun. I mean, even when I was going through the idea of podcast, I'm like, oh, what am I going to call this thing? And I too had like this note on my phone. I would just like, any sort of inspiration whenever it would come down. Yeah. But then I'd look at it at the end and I'd be like, gold star for trying, but that's not a good thing. Until I actually can't remember who remember how Small Lake City, I was like, why? Like, of course, that makes the most sense. Like, why would I call it anything else? But it's funny how you can go from like banging your head against a wall to like one little question of, is there any piece of art that's been meaningful to you that had you're like, oh yeah, it's this one and this and this and this and this makes sense because all of this. We did it.
Totally.
Just that one little
just the
question.
one question just was the right question to ask. It was cool.
Ugh. And I guess 30 plus years now working in the art scene, and building this network of artists and buyers. Who are some of the artists that you met early on in the journey that are either still here or played a big part in your role to where you were then and where you are now?
Well, I have to give credit to this group of women that we collaborated, after doing a few Utah art markets. Katrina Berg, Stephanie Hawk, Paige Anderson, Claire Tolstrup. We all met together for lunch one day, and that's when we kind of brainstormed about how to do an art show that and that's where the whole 135 came from. And so I would say that, they were women that really pushed me and that had confidence in me that, hey, you can do this and you can move forward. And, and Barbara Young is a good friend of mine. And, she was one of my, she did my shows early on, just doing prints and then originals. And now does these big, beautiful originals and big art shows and stuff. But I think, it's just having that feedback and I think that the unique thing about Utah Art Market and Four Lemons now is that there are not a lot of places that artists have to sell their work. You do have Instagram, which is, an amazing avenue. And a lot of, sometimes I wonder, like, why wouldn't you just sell on Instagram and you don't have to pay anyone a commission or anything?
True.
But I think artists, they want to focus on painting and they don't want to have to focus on, marketing and selling and, they want to be in the studio painting and I want to sell. And so it's a good combination, but I just think there are not enough places and you have to be, being in a gallery is tough. It's hard to get somebody to sell your work, and if you are in a gallery, you might get one show a year where you're really being, highlighted. And so that's one of the most exciting things, I think, for artists is that now they have a place where they can say, well, go to Four Lemons and you can see, a body of my work. And there's a spot to sell all the time. It doesn't mean that they're going to be selling, nonstop. Someone comes into my store, there's 150 artists to choose from. Yeah. So there's a lot of competition, but I do think, it's a great spot to have for that. Because frankly, somebody came in the other day and said, I've traveled a lot and I don't think there's anything like this anywhere, even here in the US. Like, where can you go and just have this much of a selection of affordable art within reach in one place? And so I think we do have something really unique.
I think so too. Especially with art, because social media has done a lot for artists. Especially, even just for like awareness and being able to follow people. But
totally.
I would never buy a piece of art if I didn't see it in person first.
Yeah.
And so while there is this aspect of, sure, you can go sell on Instagram without having to pay a gallery fee and you can, pay for marketing there, push it out that way. But artists, no matter what, will still need a place to physically put their art so people can physically come and see it and actually feel what it's like to experience it.
And I think as a buyer, it would be a little awkward, don't you think, to just show up to someone's house to look at their art and then, oh, it's not what I thought it was. Never mind.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's just awkward, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's much easier to come into a store and be like, okay, this looks a lot better than I thought it would, or, oh, it wasn't quite what I thought it was, So I do think it's great for artists, to have a place to sell their work.
Totally. And especially when you go to some artists' houses and it is just bursting from the seams. I remember when I recorded with good old Brian Mark Taylor, we recorded at his house in Alpine, and I walked in there and there is art like we even just recorded this random, like kind of like office area to his entrance, and literally lined his entire ground around the wall, on his walls, and like even others scattered. And then, I mean, he just built his new studio in the back, and I go in there, and that's still full. I'm like, yeah, I see why people need play. And he's a very fast painter too.
Yeah.
But it's interesting just to see how much art some people can have. Like, to your point, yeah, sure, throw it on Instagram, whatever, but like, it's hard to buy just based on that. And like, also to your point of artists, they just want to do their craft. Like, remember when I sat down with Howard Lyon, I mean, I was like, what's next? What's after this? He's like, well, the two things I love to do is paint and travel. And what I'm doing now is painting and traveling. So why, like, even if I retired, I would still be doing the exact same things I'm doing now. Totally. And it's interesting to see how, I mean, artists market and like try to make money. Because it's interesting to see, like, Brian, for example, he has Strava, his easel company. Howard's done really well with a lot of his signed goods from a lot of his fantasy stuff and a lot of his pose packs and stuff. And then you have, there's like other ways that they're like, okay, I need to make more money off of this. Here's this way to do it, which isn't their favorite thing to do because they want to paint. But at the same time, they have to make money in some way.
Pay the bills. Yeah.
And so, actually, he just tried to call me. That's funny. But John Darley, he's like trying to figure that thing out for him now. So he's like, do I create like an online course? Do I do this? I'm like, hey man, if you want to riff about it, I'm here. Yeah. I'm here to help. But there is something, and I know you can do it. Yeah. And so the more places that people have and more avenues, because again, like no one's going to purely sell on Instagram or purely sell at a gallery.
Yeah. And some artists, like I talked to John Darling last year, and I remember, like, artists like that, like they depend on one or two big commissions a year to get them by. And if you don't get that commission, that is hard, especially if you're a portraiture artist, because there's only a small crust of the community who's going to buy a portrait of somebody they don't know.
Yes.
And another small portion of the community that can afford to pay a portrait artist to paint them, or it's hard, but he's so good.
Oh, and it's been fun because like when I recorded with him, because he was like the first real artist I had, first artist I had. And because we go back way back, but then we went on our missions, came back, and he did his own thing, didn't graduate from college. And so I was always curious of how it went from like, okay, cool, we're here, you get married, kind of disappear. And then, oh, hey, by the way, I'm an artist now. And so I selfishly want to know his story. And it's interesting hearing of someone, literally just slaving away in a studio, learning, and then to the point where like he's like, oh, I'm getting commission, like things are working. Yeah. And so it's fun to see people get the credit that they're due, and especially all the things that he's doing and other artists around Utah that are doing, but they will always need someone to help them get their voice out, because last thing they want to do is be like, all right, let's work on this Instagram algorithm, or let's go create content for TikTok. Like that's not what they want to be doing.
Right.
They want to be in the studio and have some help to do the rest.
Yeah. I just think the thing that's kind of really cool about Utah, if I can say, is that there are so many different communities here, and for people that it can be difficult for people coming into this state because there's such a tight-knit church community, and so many people have family here that they don't necessarily like reach out to others the way that you may have when you moved to Seattle, for example, like when Grace and Benton moved to Seattle, and, they immediately had this group of like 10 friends because they didn't have family there, and so you become this tight-knit community. But I think Utah is definitely branching out more than it has been in that category. And I started 10 years ago, I started this women's group where we try to do purposeful things every month. We get together, like 10 of us. And then I have another group that we do dinner group and we cook together. And then I have another group that sometimes I play cards with or whatever. And I just think the cool thing about Utah is there's all these different ways to have community, and there's so many things to do here. Like, we grew up camping and going to Canyonlands, and I never appreciated how beautiful it was. I just thought, well, this is what everybody does. This is where we live. Okay, it's fine. It's fun. But, step back so many years later, I'm approaching 60, and I look back at my life and I think, oh my gosh, we live in this amazing place, And it's like, you have Canyonlands, and you have Lake Powell, and you have Arches, and you have Zions, and you have Bryce, and then you have the Wasatch Front, and these mountains, and skiing, and all of the outdoor things, which is so cool because it all plays into art.
Yes.
Because those are the things people paint. And they have so many things to paint, And I love that, if you live here in Utah, like there are ways to find community. Like you find your community, either your hiking community or your cooking community or your ski community, or you have a church community, or you have, a community service community. And one of the things that I think could be cool for the future of Four Lemons is it could be a gathering place for these communities. And it's like, this week I had an event where a close friend of mine who's an architect wanted to have a little open house for all of his, clients that he's worked through the years, interior designers, engineers, contractors, employees. And so, they came to Four Lemons. His wife made all this food that I mentioned earlier. And it was this beautiful community of these artistic creatives, and they could come and they could see all this beautiful art, and that maybe will be a place that they can think of in the future, like, oh, I have a client who needs a piece of art. Let's go to Four Lemons. Yeah. Or, this weekend I have an artist who I've never met before, but she always has family and friends come to a little open house at Christmas time. And so she asked if she could rent out my space to have her little art show. And I'm like, yeah, sure, that's great. And then someone else a few weeks ago said, well, do you think we could have like a book club here? And I was like, I would love that,
Yeah.
And so I love the idea of looking towards the future of this becoming a place of community and a place where people can gather and not only enjoy the beautiful art and surroundings, but hopefully meet people that they can connect with and that they can find common ground with. And I think there's a lot of potential there. I'm not really interested in hosting like wedding receptions or anything, but
I'd be worried if you did.
I think these little groups of community that can come and gather, I would love, because that is something I'm all about. Like one of my kids or my husband say my greatest strength is also my greatest weakness, which is I don't like anyone to feel left out. I want to include everyone in everything.
Got it.
It's like, you don't have to be so inclusive all the time, but I am like this inclusive person, and I love nothing more than for people to meet, and for artists to meet collectors, and for collectors to meet artists, and for artists to meet each other and be inspired by each other. So that's kind of like a future that I'm hoping for, is creating this space of community.
And I love how it comes back to kind of why you started Four Lemons, is you're like, I'm sick of trying to find this space to bring people together for community.
Yeah.
And so now you're like, listen, I do have a space. You want to have your book club? You want to come have all of your interior design and all your clients? Bring them in.
Yeah.
So I love that is part of it, because I agree. Like if there's something special about Utah, especially Salt Lake, it's community. Because it's all based on, when Utah came to be, and the feeling of deseret, of this community together, of industry working together towards a greater cause. And I've seen that across so many different avenues and aspects and, segments of Salt Lake. And I always tell people that, because, again, it's interesting being born and raised here, leaving and coming back, because I had another appreciation, listen, I was in Seattle, which is a beautiful place, but this place is also amazing. And even in Seattle, I didn't feel a great sense of community. Like, there were friends, obviously Benton and others, but I never felt like it was this warm welcome from everybody.
Right.
They always talk about the Seattle Freeze, and even the people I would meet at work. I don't want to go see. I've seen you for 40 hours this week. I'm not going to spend more time with you. Right. Come on.
I know.
And so that's one thing I love about Salt Lake, especially now as people move here. There's a lot of sentiment from people who are either from here or been here long enough of this is all here. I'm born and raised around it. Yeah. But then you have these people coming in just wide-eyed and so excited to be part of it. And they also just want to find their people to enjoy it with. And we could go down the laundry list of recreational activities that everybody does, or the places that everybody goes, but there's a reason that they do it. Yeah. And so it's fun to see people engage and create a community around that. Right. Because I think that's something so special. And anybody I talk to who's like, well, I just don't have friends. I don't know what to do. I don't have community. I'm like, well, what have you done to try? Because they're not going to find you, but you might have to do a little bit of work to find them. But when you do, it's going to be a great thing.
Totally.
And once I've seen people at least put in the effort, they found their tribe pretty easily.
Yeah. And do you ever, I mean, this is a little off topic, but I'm just looking at your hat, looking at the small lake city up there. And I'm like, you know, have you ever gone to a place where like where you went to high school played such an important role in connecting with people? You know, like, well, where did you grow up? Well, it's not like what part of the city do you live in? It's, well, where did you go to high school?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, well, did you know? You know, like, and everyone's trying to make connections here. So I think that is a kind of cool, unique in that we are this big sprawling city now, like that goes forever, but there is still that small lake city feel of, I mean, you can always seem to make some connection to somebody.
Without a doubt. Yeah. And it's like, even as you mentioned that, I literally went to this holiday party on Saturday where I was invited by a friend, but I didn't really know anybody else. And I was like, all right, whatever. So, I mean, I always typically wear a small lake city hat because once you have your own brand, why would you wear anything else?
Exactly.
And I walk in and like people make comments on the hat. I'm like, oh, yep, small lake city. They're like, well, why do you have it? Oh, it's a podcast. Oh, and like they were all also like East High alumni. And so like, where'd you go to high school? I'm like, East. Like, where'd you grow up? Like, wait, you did? What? Middle school? I went to Clayton. Oh, where did you grow up? Like here, then here. Like, oh, so you probably know this person, this person, this person, this person, this person. Like, yeah, you probably know my older sister, this sister. Like, yep, sounds good. And it's just like instantly. Like I've been reflecting a lot recently on like what small lake city means to me. And I actually had like, I was going home at like 3 a.m. one night and I like recorded this whole voice memo because it was the first time it was like as lucid so and as clear as could be. And I think one thing is like, it's the difference of making a friend compared to meeting a stranger, because there's so much connection, even as simple as a question of where'd you go to high school? What neighborhood are you from? But all of a sudden you realize, oh, we have these 5 mutual friends we didn't even know about. And now we aren't strangers at all anymore. And we're trending closer towards friends. Yeah. And so, and like, cause I guess I never like experienced that in Seattle. No one ever asked me where I went to high school in Seattle.
No, I know. That's something you don't see anywhere else. No. You know? And it's, you know, like I just was thinking in December at my Utah art market as I was checking people out and just like, wow, you know, and so many of them are be like, you know, I've been coming to this since you were in your backyard, you know, and I'm like, wow, a lot of these people are just loyal, you know, and they've been doing this for 30 years. And it's astounding to me that people are still sticking around, you know, that there is that sense and like, God, this is my tribe here. These are my people. Like they have been coming, they have been supporting local artists for 30 years. And there's a real sense of loyalty and community here that I love. From
backyard to lines out the door to now your own store. I mean, it's fun. You've created a great community in it. And I would imagine you've tried to leave as few people behind as you can.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that we haven't left anyone behind. I hope, you know, and I just say to anybody listening that, you know, if you haven't found your community and you need someone, stop by Four Lemons because, you know, we'll bring you in. Exactly. Here, everyone's part of the family here.
Come on in. And especially like, if you're going to complain and not do anything, then you should probably stop complaining. And so if you need a step towards finding something or someone, come stop by 411. Nanette will meet you with open arms.
That's right.
Well, Nanette, I want to end with the 2 questions I always ask everybody at the end is number 1, if you could have someone on the Small Lake City podcast and hear more about their story and what they're up to, who would you want to hear from?
Gosh, this is interesting. You know, somebody I've been really interested in lately, and I've never really met them in person, but she started the whole, no, just lost it. Her name's Missy Grice.
Yeah.
She started
Public,
you know, and my friend Warren Lloyd, who's an architect who worked with her, like talks about her all the time and how she's always doing all these community things.
Yes.
I think she's a really interesting person.
So good news is we're emailing right now and we'll probably record early next year.
Oh, good.
But you're absolutely right. And I've been slowly figuring this out too. Because, I mean, I don't want to say I've forgotten about her because that makes me sound bad, but she wasn't on a targeted list by me until I went to a concert with a friend. He's like, oh, you should have Missy on. Like, Like, yeah, Public's gone from this like little shop to like, I mean, they're involved in a ton of things.
Yeah.
But then last week's guest was Cassandra Verbruggen, who's the executive director for Spy Hop.
Oh,
and when I was
right.
getting ready for that, I was looking at their board, and Missy's on that board. And I was like,
wow.
wow. Just seeing, again, how all of these like little social fibers come together.
Yeah.
I was like, of course she would be involved with all of that. And of course she's involved with all this community. So
Right.
The more I find out about Missy, the more excited I am to sit down and chat with her.
Yeah. And, you know, Warren Lloyd is a local architect here who has done a lot of work in Utah and preserving historical buildings and also building like really cool modern architecture. And, you know, he started out taking over his dad's small architectural business where he did mostly LDS churches. And now Warren's taken it over and made this amazing architectural firm of, you know, you should see some of his projects. Like, I think he's a really cool up and coming influential architect here in the state.
Oh, I love a good. So my first major in college was architecture.
Really?
So take me to Chicago, my jaws dropped the entire time.
Oh, I bet.
And so I would enjoy a conversation with him.
Yeah, he's a great guy too. So
Cool.
yeah, there's a couple thoughts that come to mind, and I'll keep
Great people.
plugging you for a few others.
And then lastly, if people want to find out more about Four Lemons, what's the best way to find the store or information about it?
So we do have a website. It's called fourlemonsart.com. We have a online store where you can find us at fourlemonsart.com. And if you want to come see us in person, we're on Highland Drive and 4850 South. So we're in a little strip mall just west of the old Cottonwood Mall, next to Chico's and FedEx and the Dyson store. So it's kind of a small little strip mall, but it's starting to revitalize. And I think Four Lemons has kind of given that place a facelift, and it's a fun space. So you want to come see us in person if you can.
I agree. Because we all know someone who just moved into a house, or someone who appreciates art, or you need to give someone a gift to family members so they can have their own Four Lemons experience. Or, I mean, the list goes on and on and on, especially this time of year. So give something to someone worth giving, and don't just go buy something off Amazon.
And handmade for the holidays. That's my tagline this year. So
I agree.
And we are on Instagram as well. You can kind of get a little feel for us through our Instagram feed at Four Lemons Art and Utah Art Market as well.
Definitely. Well, Nanette, it has been a treasure. Thank you so much for all that you're doing.
Thanks, Eric. It's so fun to talk to you about art.
I know. I mean, I selfishly just have the podcast so I can just talk to people and have them tell me their stories.
You have a gift of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you so much for listening